Hey guys, Pete here. Today I'm going to do one last Better Call Saul bonus video as we wait for the finale of Season 5. It's time to talk about Eduardo Lalo Salamanca. As we approach the end of Better Call Saul Season 5, Lalo has become the most interesting villain in the current story, and this has led some fans to declare that he's the best villain the Breaking Bad universe has ever produced. The hype is definitely real. Lalo is a great character and a great villain. Officially, I think it's too early to tell where he'll rank against so many other great villains this franchise has introduced us to, but I think now's a great time to look at what makes him so compelling. To borrow a quote from the man himself, when he first meets Jimmy, he tells him, "You're the guy for this." In many ways, I believe Lalo is the guy for this, and that's what I want to explore. Before we dive in, this is your spoiler warning. This video will talk about everything that's happened in Better Call Saul through Season 5, Episode 9, and everything that happened in Breaking Bad. If you haven't made it that far, then this video will be filled with massive spoilers that you won't be able to unsee. Lalo Salamanca is a latecomer to the origin story of Saul Goodman. His first appearance doesn't happen until the 8th episode of Season 4. He comes to Albuquerque to help with the Salamanca family business, which has experienced some setbacks. In Season 2, his cousin, Tuco Salamanca, is sent to prison after Nacho Varga hires Mike to set him up. In Season 3, his uncle Hector Salamanca becomes permanently disabled after he's poisoned by Nacho. The cousins, Lionel and Marco Salamanca, come to visit their uncle after his stroke, but end up having to flee back south of the border to Mexico after attacking the Espinosa gang. Their departure leaves Nacho, who by this time is under Gus Fring's influence, in charge of the Salamanca family operations in New Mexico. That opens the door for Lalo to arrive and get things in order for the Salamancas. Prequel shows are hard to make because the end of the story they're based on has already been told. Better Call Saul has always excelled in light of that. It never ceases to amaze me how they come up with ways to make the journey to that end compelling and full of surprises. The show has always been impressive in its ability to take things that seem minor from Breaking Bad and turn them into something interesting. There have been so many little details and throwaway lines from Breaking Bad that the writers have picked up and run with. Lalo Salamanca is one of the best examples of that. The name Lalo first comes up in Breaking Bad Season 2, Episode 8, which shares the title Better Call Saul with our current series. The episode is best remembered as the introduction of Saul Goodman, but it also serves as the origin of both Nacho Varga and Lalo Salamanca. In that episode, Jesse and Walt, disguised in ski masks, kidnap Saul Goodman and take him to a freshly dug shallow grave in a remote part of the desert. We watch as Saul finds himself fearing for his life, and his first instinct is that the kidnappers are members of the cartel. As you would expect, Saul tries to talk his way out of the situation. First, he tries to shift the blame, saying, "No, it wasn't me, it was Ignacio, he's the one." Then in Spanish, he says he's a friend of the cartel, and then he asks them, "Lalo didn't send you? No Lalo?" So from that exchange, two characters from Saul's backstory are born: Ignacio, aka Nacho, and of course, Lalo. Neither character is mentioned by name again in Breaking Bad, but it is implied later in a conversation between Gus and Hector that Lalo is no longer alive. In Season 4, Episode 11, Gus goes to visit Hector at Casa Tranquila after killing off Don Eladio and the other leaders of the cartel. He tells Hector that his grandson Joaquin was killed as well, and that since he was the only family he had left, the Salamanca family name will die with Hector. In his business dealings and personal obsession with the family, Gus would be better informed on whether Lalo was still around than Saul. Saul is clearly afraid of him and believes he's still alive in that moment when they're in the desert, but based on what Gus said to Hector, we know Lalo's days are numbered. He could even die during Better Call Saul's timeline, just as long as it happens in a way that Jimmy doesn't know about it. And that's not a very big stretch considering when people commit murder, they usually try to keep it a secret. While all of this is intriguing enough, in a show that has no shortage of crazy and/or violent criminals, what makes Lalo stand out from the crowd? Through the first 4 seasons of Better Call Saul in the pre-Lalo days, the bad guys in the show had been contained to one side of the show or the other. We had the Jimmy McGill's law career side of the show, where his brother Chuck was the main villain. On that side, Jimmy and Kim battled with a number of people like Howard Hamlin and the Kettlemans. And then over on the other side, we had the cartel story, where Mike and Nacho had to deal with characters like Tuco and Gus. The two stories didn't really cross over outside of Jimmy and Tuco's introduction in the first couple of episodes in season 1. At the end of season 5, we've reached the point where the show's two sides of the story have finally come together. The legal side of Kim and Jimmy has collided with the cartel side of Mike, Gus, and Nacho. As these things come together, we need a villain that can be effective in both worlds, and Lalo seems to be the right man for the job. Lalo is the guy for this. From his first introduction, we can see that he is the most charismatic Salamanca we've ever met. In that way, it's easy to make the argument that he is the best villain that Better Call Saul has produced. Chuck was a great character, and the family dynamic made him a cruel opponent for Jimmy, but he never would have been able to operate in the cartel's world. Lalo, on the other hand, can sit down with Gus and Juan Bolsa as a representative for his family, but you could also imagine him being able to strike up a conversation with Howard Hamlin. The other Salamanca family members we've met are a mixed bag of crazy and ruthless. Tuco, which is the first of the family we met in Breaking Bad, was a drug-using maniac, erratic to his core. The cousins had a laid-back way in comparison, but they seemed to truly enjoy bringing violence into a situation when they thought it was necessary. Hector was also erratic and always appeared to have a chip on his shoulder. That brought things down around him until he ended up confined to that wheelchair. Lalo is loyal to his family, which is something we know about all the Salamancas, but he's also clearly different. That's not to say he doesn't share in some of the family's dark tendencies. He killed Fred from Travel Wire without a second thought. And the story he shared with Hector about burning down a hotel after torturing its owner was disturbing. He's violent and remorseless, but he also seems like he's got things under control. He's smart and resourceful, and we've seen him stack up as a worthy adversary for Gus. We've seen him be patient in that area and methodical to a certain extent. He can also be chatty and friendly and has the ability to charm people. When he entered the story in season 4, I immediately perked up at the idea of him breathing life into the cartel side of the story. As interesting as learning more about Mike and Gus can be, that side of the story started lagging behind because the stakes just aren't the same considering we know how their stories end. Lalo presented a real problem for Gus, which got things moving in the right direction. And then, once he met Saul, we could see the two stories starting to come together. That's where he gets really fascinating from my perspective. His charisma and ability to win people over bears a lot of resemblance to what makes Jimmy so effective. Jimmy/Saul can do the things he does because even though he's comfortable getting down in the dirt with criminals, he still has a straight life that exists outside the criminal world. He has a criminal nature. He commits criminal acts, but he toes the line, and his law license gives him a sense of respectability. Lalo is almost the exact opposite. He lives a criminal existence but can navigate the other side of the story and even excel there. Creating a character in Lalo that shares many of the same strengths as Saul creates the perfect storm. Saul can usually talk his way out of any situation he finds himself in. When Lalo shows up at his door in 509, things are instantly turned upside down. Jimmy isn't able to talk himself out of this one. Lalo once again appears to be the guy for this. He sees right through Jimmy's lies, leaving him defenseless until the only thing that saves him is Kim stepping in. She's able to use her skills to neutralize the situation, and in the end he decides to leave. We haven't really met a character who is so perfectly suited to go up against Jimmy McGill. And as we approach the endgame of Jimmy's transition into Saul, Lalo could really prove to be an important piece in that puzzle. For now, we don't know how Lalo's story will end, but either way, he's proven to be one of the most captivating and infectious characters that we've come across in the Breaking Bad universe. In short order, he brought excitement into Gus and Mike's side of the story, delivered some extra humor and more tension in his quest to make Gus's life difficult. He became the perfect bridge to bring both sides of the story together and emerged as the perfect adversary for Saul Goodman all at the same time. He's an awful human being, and yet you almost want to root for the guy. Not knowing how his story ends keeps things exciting. We expect him to die, but there also needs to be a setup for Jimmy to still be terrified of him 4 years from now. He could die in the season 5 finale, or he could die off screen years later after the events of Breaking Bad season 2. It adds an extra dimension, and I'm excited to see where they take it. As I said before, I think it's a little early to put him up at the top of the list. Of course, right now, he's the most exciting villain in the Breaking Bad universe, but we'll have to see where his story ends. It's the same kind of thing that I think about when people say, which is better, Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul? They're both different shows, and one of them is complete. There's things I like better about both series, but I really wouldn't pick one over the other until I know how Better Call Saul ends. So I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think about Lalo Salamanca in the comments. How do you think his story will end? As far as coming into the story late, he stacks up pretty well in that category. In Breaking Bad, we had Uncle Jack and Todd. They did the job. Todd especially was a pretty good character, but they couldn't really live up to Gus. Lalo came to the game a little bit later, and that gives him an advantage. So drop a comment to tell me what you think. Please like this video if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Thanks for watching. I will talk to you soon.